I know. Cimo was wrong. Hey, guys, Cimo was wrong about something. I'm aware. Yes, I was wrong about Adamancipator. The deck is actually just batshit crazy. But I want to take the time in this video to go ahead and discuss what we can do to help combat that if you do happen to come across this deck in the April 2020 format. Cimo! What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you a video on how to beat Adamancipator. Now, the intro of this video basically speaks for itself. I know I was wrong on my tier list video of where I placed it, but to be fair, looking at the performance of the deck in the OCG, even though obviously everything from the OCG doesn't translate to the TCG properly, I didn't really have high hopes for the deck. I never thought the deck was bad. When I talked about the deck initially, when we first saw the cards, I thought it was actually pretty decent, but I did not think it was going to be nearly this powerful as we've seen in the last several weeks. So I want to take this time to explain why the deck is so good and also explain some counters that you can use if you happen to come across the deck on the online servers, so that way you can have the best chance at beating this deck as possible. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So like I said, I want to start off with why this deck is so powerful. So first and foremost, the deck is all gas. Every single card in this deck is either like a starter or an extender. So it's either a card that's getting your play off the ground running, or it's something that if you happen to hit a hand trap or play into some of your opponent's disruption, it's going to allow you to continue your combo anyway, and you don't even care about it. I mean, when you have each of the Adamancipator cards themselves, basically allowing you to excavate and then special summon one another, cascading into this insane level of advantage. But then when you pair that with all the other crazy rock synergistic cards like Block Dragon, I mean, Block Dragon's starting to look like this card might get hit on the ban list at some point. We already know how good this card was in Block Dragon Burning Abyss, but now we're seeing it in like an all rock based deck, and now it is just being abused like it has never been abused before. Another interesting addition to this deck is the inclusion of the automat cards. You know, stuff like the Dododo and the Go-Go-Go. I think it's Dododo Dwarf, Go-Go-Go Glove. You also have Go-Go-Go Gigas, and different cards like this that effectively allow you to get 2 level 4s onto the field to then Xyz into your Gallant Granite, which then effectively searches for any card in your deck. Most likely you're going to be getting Block Dragon, so then that way you can get that onto the board and start getting advantage through those means. And some of the boards that you have to contend with when you're facing Adamancipator are absolutely disgusting. I mean, you have multiple monster effect negations in the form of Appaloosa, but then there's also like Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon in here. There's Herald of the Arclight, which is an Omni negate. You have the in-archetype Dragite, the Adamancipator Risen Dragite, which is a spell and trap negation card. I mean, the possibilities of this deck are limitless, and if that weren't enough, the board typically also has a Masquerena with a Block Dragon on the board, so then that way during your opponent's turn, you can at any point link off Masquerena and the Block Dragon for something like Nightmare Unicorn. Unicorn can spin one of your opponent's cards away, and not to mention that Block Dragon will trigger on your opponent's turn. This is very reminiscent to me of like when Fairy Tail Snow was legal, when Danger Thunder Dragon was still around, because that's where that deck started to get very unfair, was when you were triggering Thunder Dragon effects during your opponent's turn to get maximum amounts of advantage. The deck is just crazy. Now, another reason why Adamancipator is incredibly powerful is because it's able to assemble a monster effect negation source before it commits to a lot of its key plays. So for instance, a lot of people just default to Nibiru when they think combo deck, right? Like, oh yeah, they're gonna easily have to commit to more than 5 summons before they get something like Appaloosa on the field. This deck actually has other means to get to monster effect negation. So for instance, Kawaki Meru Guardian. This is a rock monster, so you can hit it off any of your Adamancipators, and essentially as soon as this hits the field, your Nibiru and any of your other monster-based hand traps are shut down as long as that Guardian remains on the field. But typically, even if they start going down their combo, they can just pivot that into something like Appaloosa when they want to start assembling their end board. Another card, as I mentioned earlier, Herald of the Arclight. All of the Adamancipators, or no, I'm sorry, most of them are level 2 tuners, which can then sync off with some of the other cards, like for instance Doki Doki, and make Herald of the Arclight again before 5 summons, insulating you from any of these cards that would just be absolutely devastating if you are a combo player. So being able to not only assemble the absurd boards that you're able to, but with protection negation from some of the most popular sources of disruption in the game is absolute madness. Now that we've discussed why Adamancipator is so powerful, I want to pivot to how we can combat this deck. And one of the interesting things, especially when you look at hand traps, because hand traps is what a lot of people default to, hand traps are rather weak against this deck for a few reasons. So when you think about, your traditional combo deck and how stopping a key effect can matter, when it comes to Adamancipator, they actually are able to extend through a lot of their plays by just having a rock monster on the field. This is the summoning condition on some of the Adamancipator monsters, and this is why they're able to keep going even if they get hit with Ash Blossom or like Infinite Impermanence. Sure, you negate the effect, but the monster is still on the field, and they're able to play through that regardless. So we need to find a way to clear those monsters off the board, and not a lot of hand traps do that. It's kind of similar to like why Salamangreat makes some of those cards rather weak as well, because they're able to either get the resources back or just like reincarnation link something into something else, so then it doesn't really matter, right? So let's talk about Nibiru, because I did mention Nibiru earlier, and to be fair, Nibiru can actually be incredibly powerful against these boards if you use it at the right time, or if you get lucky and they don't hit something like, Kwakimeru Guardian off of one of their Adamancipator effects. It really kind of depends, but the thing is you can't rely on Nibiru as you would compared to some other combo decks where Nibiru might be a blowout. One thing when it comes to hand traps in particular is that by themselves, I don't think they are necessarily powerful enough to be able to really stop this deck, but in combination with one another, then I think that's where you're going to start to see some success. So for instance, Nibiru by itself may not be enough, because if they have a monster effect negation card on their field, then it's not going to matter. But if you have a way to be able to negate the effect of whatever's negating that Nibiru, then you're going to be in good shape. So for instance, Psy-Frame Gear Gamma. Gamma is a good card because Nibiru doesn't commit anything to the board, so hypothetically you could go activate Nibiru after they've done 5 summons, they might chain their Guardian or something like that, and then you chain Gamma, chain resolves backwards, Gamma negates the monster that they have on their field, and then Nibiru will resolve, clear everything off the board, and that should be enough in most instances to be able to win out. You do have to be careful though, because you're giving them a rock token to work with, so depending on what extenders they have to recover, it may not be enough, but typically if you have any combination of 2 hand traps, and if Nibiru is one of them, that might be enough to slow them down. Infinite Impermanence is another big one, and of note, neither Impermanence nor Gamma, or I guess Nibiru for that matter, lose to Call by the Grave, so that's a plus, but do keep in mind that Infinite Impermanence isn't removing the threat from the board, whereas Gamma does, so do keep that in mind. But hand traps aside, now I want to discuss some cards that are more skewed towards going first, whether you're a control deck that wants to main deck these specific cards, or maybe you lose game 1 to Adamancipator and you want to side deck these cards in when you know you get to pick whether to go first or second. So first up is there can be only one. This has been like the floodgate of several of the past formats since this card's release, and against Adamancipator, it's really not much different because the deck is comprised almost entirely of rock monsters, so this card can really slow them down quite a bit. Same thing goes for Summon Limit. I mean, as soon as they commit to 2 summons, just flip up Summon Limit, and guess what? They're really not going to be able to do much more. They can't go into Nightmare Phoenix to out it because they've already committed to their summons for the turn, so that seems pretty good. Now, maybe your opponent is going to recognize that you might side in some sort of floodgate, and so they're going to play some sort of spell and trap removal to combat your strategy. However, Artifact Sanctum is a good way to counteract this because it's a normal trap, so it's not going to stay face up on your field. If they do destroy it, you get to pop something in your opponent's field as well, which is an added bonus, but what you're mainly looking for here is that Artifact Scythe coming down, being able to lock them out of their extra deck for the turn. Adamancipator is not really doing much with their extra deck out of the equation, and then as long as you can either just kill them on the following turn or just take control of the game to the point where it doesn't matter what they play, you need to just make sure you got a lock on that, because once their extra deck's back online, you want to make sure they can't kill you on the crackback. But now let's say we're in the opposite position. Let's say we won the first game, but our opponent is going to make us go second, or we're playing a blind second deck. What cards are the best for when we know we are going second against Adamancipator? So first up is any of the tribute monsters that will tribute over your opponent's monsters. Now, typically Kaijus are pretty safe. However, for this particular instance, I think we have to go a little bit heavier than that. I think we actually need to go for cards like Lava Golem and Winged Dragon of Raw Sphere mode, because you guys have seen some of the boards this deck is able to create, and I don't think a singular kaiju is really going to do it here. Lava Golem or Sphere mode being able to 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 our opponent's monsters respectively might give us the window that we need, that if they do set up this seemingly just unassailable board, then we're going to be able to just clear the biggest threats depending on the composition of our hand and at least have a fighting chance. It's not guaranteed, but at least there's some hope that we can get rid of some of their biggest threats. Another card that's really good is Dark Ruler No More. Now, when it comes to this deck, it pretty much relies all on its monster effects, and Dark Ruler No More makes it so your opponent can't respond with any of their monster effects and negates everything that they have that is on their field. This is probably the go-to card if you're looking for a way to stop this deck. I've seen some people even main decking Dark Ruler No More right now. That's how terrified they are of Adamancipator, so for good reason, but this card is incredibly powerful, and if you don't already have yours, you might want to pick them up. Some other generic going second cards include Lightning Storm and Evenly Matched, but the big problem with this, and this is kind of alluding to what I was saying about with hand traps, is that by themselves, these cards don't do enough, because Adamancipator is able to put up spell and trap negations, so you kind of need these cards in multiples if you want them to be any bit effective. I mean, if you slap down Lightning Storm and that gets negated by Dragite or Herald of the Arclight, then you can slam down Evenly Matched, then you might have an opportunity to be able to pierce their board and set up a board of your own, so that way, you know, they're not going to just completely overwhelm you on the following turn because they most likely triggered Block Dragon. But in any case, these are some cards that are incredibly powerful against a myriad of different decks going second, and this deck is no exception, but you need to make sure that you see them in multiples, otherwise it's not going to be enough. You could also make the argument that Mystic Mine is in this category as well, because again, if they're not citing any sort of spell and trap removal in the form of spell and trap cards, then if they negate your Lightning Storm, they negate your Evenly Matched, you can just slap down Mystic Mine, and guess what? You just won yourself the game. But guys, that's gonna do it for my video on how to beat Adamancipator. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.